Here's Peter Dorhout to introduce our program for today.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be before you and to share in one of my faculty members' research interests and his scholarship, as well as talk a little bit about his leadership. And Sarah, I think I need to come visit you because my arm is not still not quite long. Let's see if I can read this. Matthew Gaynor is a recent addition to the Kansas State family, and is an individual who I recognize as someone who has had great leadership experiences and fantastic potential to lead our Department of Art here at K-State. Matthew received his MFA in graphic design from Yale University, and prior to beginning his teaching career at the University of Kansas. So it is in your honor that I'm wearing this blue sweater today. It just happened to be that way. He served in teaching positions at Cal State University in San Bernardino, and then later on at the University of Cincinnati, where he was promoted to associate professor. And shortly after that, he took an opportunity to, he writes, I think I wrote this actually, but took a hiatus from teaching and went into the private sector and served as creative director for F&W Publications before returning to academia at the University of Illinois in Chicago. At UIC, Matthew taught all levels of the curriculum, as well as developing courses in introductory graphic design and photography for designers. His leadership portfolio is an impressive one. He served as an interim director at UIC for the School of Art and Design, and served for 5 years as the Associate Dean for Faculty Affairs for the College of Architecture and the Arts at the University of Illinois, Chicago. In his role, he was part of campus committees that shaped 3 most recent major campus policy initiatives on diversity, assessment, and mentoring at the University of Illinois, Chicago. So over the course of his career, he has won many awards for his graphic design work, which has been focused on the intersection of type and image, and continues his practice of typographic design, as well as new modes of photographic portraiture. So again, it's my pleasure as the Dean of Arts and Sciences to introduce Matthew Gaynor to you this afternoon.
Thank you, Peter. He wrote that because I would never write anything that long about it. And thank you all for welcoming me here. This is actually my second visit, but the first time I have to stand up and face people. So I'm not a particularly fantastic public speaker, so please pardon my pauses and flubs. So I'm going to speak today just a little bit about a little story about what art means. The Socratic method is a form of inquiry and discussion between individuals, which is based on asking and answering questions to stimulate critical thinking and to illuminate ideas. This is a picture by the painter Jacques-Louis David called The Death of Socrates. Obviously, there were some pluses and minuses to his methodologies. So instead of leading you on a series of questions, I'm going to tell you a story about opening your eyes to the world, which is what the arts are really all about. I knew a former student who, despite a great deal of intelligence and talent, found himself suddenly and temporarily at the wrong end of the economic scale and living at home with his parents. He would come home at the end of the day to a boring suburb where he'd grown up and from which he had thought that he had escaped, where his mom would be dutifully cooking the evening's roast and his dad would be comfortably ensconced on the living room couch reading the newspaper after a long day at work. The complete ordinariness of this scene to him contrasted sharply with his taste for cool things, which he now lacked the funds to acquire. He envied his friends who had the means, if not the taste, to surround themselves with those things he believed would signal his success. As an antidote to what he saw as the blandness of his surroundings, he would wander through the upscale neighborhoods, looking through the windows and beautiful homes or going to museums to look at the great men and paintings of castles. Of course, all this envy was doing him absolutely no good. So a friend proposed that he stop torturing himself and take a trip to 2 different parts of the museum and to look at the work of Jean-Baptiste Chardin and William Bailey. Now, neither of these guys made pictures of grand palaces or lush landscapes or cool objects or anything like that at all. They liked to paint pots and pans, bread and milk, eggs and wine, in both cases. When they painted people, which they only did occasionally, they were rarely rock stars or royalty, but ordinary people. A simple portrait of a woman at ease, a mother showing her daughter some mistakes in her needlework. But despite the ordinary nature of these subjects, both of these artists, whose work is separated by 100 years, and the myriad changes in both taste and society, they both made paintings of extraordinary beauty. Through their eyes, objects we might have thought quotidian are transformed into objects of beauty that make us look at the world in a new way. A dead fish on a Chardin sparkles with the same brilliance of silver crown. A Bailey still life of tableware and eggs builds form as majestically as any palace or landscape. Through their eyes, the making of a simple meal can remind us of the beauty of the sea, the sky, and the earth from which they all came. Their paintings are made from a world that is completely familiar to us, but which are transformed by these artists into something that makes us rethink our relationship to the everyday and the world that surrounds us. So what was the point of directing him to this side of the side trip to the less well-traveled parts of the museum? Well, by searching out and taking the time to really look at the works of art such as these, one can see, perhaps for the first time, that the most ordinary things in your life possess the same possibility of beauty and meaning as those things we think can only be had at great price or through fancy words and theory. There really is no need to feel cut off from the beauty of the world or the deeper connections between the things in our lives, or to be envious of the people who own beautiful things or expensive ideas. After looking at a Chardin or a Bailey, if you paid close enough attention, the sun coming through the windows of your mother's kitchen, the boots caked with mud at the back door, or the flicker of a cell phone's light on your friend's face in the dark, anything really, can be transformed into something as beautiful and full and full of wonder as the most precious stone. Why did this guy, or anyone for that matter, find himself alienated from the everyday beauty of life? How did he come to lose the power, a power we all possessed as children, to see in all things around us the potential for wonder? You might say it just seems natural to be engaged by the beauty of some things and at a loss in the face of others. We just know, as it were, we are supposed to be moved by emeralds, not apples, castles, not kitchenware. But we should not be fooled by how quickly these distinctions come to mind into thinking that these judgments are in any way natural. If one fails to see the beauty that is always near at hand in life, it is because, in part, of a lack of images that show us these things without any irony or condescension. In today's world where we are bombarded with images, we are rarely exposed to images which depict the world in which we actually live. And that world is beautiful and worth our attention. This saturation of media images pushes us to conflate things that are desirable with things that are beautiful. And those things we are taught to desire are often depicted as something outside of our lives, but also as commodities that we might acquire, destinations towards which we must travel. But truly great visual artists can open our eyes to see the world at hand in an entirely new light, and to restore the wonder of everyday life, the play of light across the table in the afternoon sun, the dance of a plastic bag in the wind. Looking at a Chardin or a Bailey can remind us of the extent to which our dissatisfactions may be a result of not looking at our lives from the right point of view, rather than anything inherently deficient in any of our circumstances. Appreciating the beauty of an ordinary kitchen scene does not preclude interest in French cuisine, but failing to do so might call into question our overall capacity for appreciation of anything in a meaningful way. The recovery of the whole world as a repository of beauty, and not just the parts that have been marketed to us as beautiful, only requires that an emphasis be placed on a certain way of looking, rather than on a process of acquiring and possessing. And this other way of looking at the world is how art can enrich our lives. To engage in the arts involves a certain way of being in the world and the development of a certain way of looking at the world. It is a way that embraces the notion that beauty and meaning are ideas that must be found, even sought out, rather than being the stuff of received wisdom or tradition. This way of looking at the world asks us to pay special attention to the ordinary details of what we encounter close at hand, as well as cultivating a broad knowledge of the world and of the larger forces at play in the world around us. It also asks us to discover the nuances and relationships between things that might otherwise be overlooked in order to weave those elements into something new and rich and memorable. Something rich not only in form, but also in the resonances created and developed between form and its content. As an artist, to approach what we do otherwise is to subject ourselves to the disquietude of the young man in the story I opened with. If we are not looking directly at the real world around us for inspiration and joy, if we simply rely on the prepackaged, predigested images and styles that we encounter on a daily basis to inspire us, we will always find the world and what we do and who we are lacking. Art can tell us that to inhabit a life full of things of beauty and value, all we need to do is open our eyes to a new way and look around us. It's all right there, right before our very eyes. Thank you.
Very good.
Questions or comments for Matthew?
I don't have a question, but I have a statement or a comment. And first of all, thank you for increasing our awareness from this perspective. And I have somebody that you might be interested in collaborating with, and that's Karen's 9-year-old, who often says to me, "Isn't that cool?"
9-year-olds know.
Anyone else?
Can you tell us a little bit about the department, the makeup, with the different faculty we have right at the moment?
At the moment, At the moment, the department consists of, I believe, 9 areas of concentration. Painting, drawing, printmaking, sculpture, digital experimental media, graphic design, ceramics, photography, and I guess the 9th is actually our foundation, so that covers it. The departments, the concentration areas are overseen by 1- and 2-person faculty. We have a number of adjuncts who also teach with us. And so that's where we are. We also have a graduate program. We have about 15 graduate students in total at the moment. And so that's where we are. Yes?
Can you tell us about your specialty and particularly typography and art as you described it?
My education and what I've done up until now has revolved around how do you join words and images together to make some meaning that is deeper and richer than the two separately. And so the first part of my working career, I was a book designer and a magazine designer. And when I became the creative director of F&W Publications, which is a big publisher of artists, books, and materials, that's sort of what I brought to the table there, to try to raise the level of what was going on in the publications they were making. When I moved to Chicago, I changed my career. My career up until then I'd been doing, I'd actually had a practice where I was making design work for clients. When I moved to Chicago, for a variety of reasons, I essentially stopped doing that after the first 2 years I was there, and focused on poster design, which is sort of the quintessential joining of words and image. And I was doing posters for plays. I had a college friend, was artistic director of a theater company in North Carolina, and I also did work for the theater department at the university. And so I was doing about 10 posters a year, which is actually a lot. And I read more plays than Well, I don't read plays anymore. so that the focus of my research was making these posters and trying to find a deeper way to make the images that went into the posters and integrate that with the ideas that the plays were trying to propose. And so, in a poster you only have, in a sense, a minute for people to understand what's going on in the play and to be intrigued enough to want to come see it. So it's a completely different sort of modality of working than working on a magazine, or a book, which is a little bit more like a movie, because as you turn the pages, you retain the information, and there should be a particular flow in a book or a magazine that makes you want to turn the page. So that's sort of about me.
So you've come here recently. And Willard Hall's had a lot of investment, and a lot of the art stuff's been moved into there from other parts of campus, and the whole building now I think is
We're all in
basically
essentially one place.
Yeah. So how's that working? Is it working well for everybody?
Yes, actually, Peter and the campus and Rebecca's actually a part of this too. Is they've put a lot of money into the building to make it safe for our students to work, which is a big concern, both from a sort of ethical standpoint, but also from a pragmatic standpoint. And so, although faculty a little bit, as always, complain about stuff, but the facility is actually one of the nicer facilities that's not a new facility that I've encountered in my years. And so I'm pretty pleased. The only thing that I would like is to somehow be able to recapture some of the shared classrooms that still exist in the building, because of course we could use a little bit more space, but I understand those issues on campus. Hopefully when everybody moves around after all this new building, they'll just abandon us. We'll be able to
have the whole building.
Right, I'll be able to be king of everything that I survey.
Periodic table and lecture hall events.
The back room. Have you ever been in the back room in that?
No.
There are old chemistry experimental things in there that are completely cool. They put stuff back in, vacuum tubes and shovels. It's really excellent.
Would you classify those as things of beauty?
I would. And, I'm, one day going to go in there and acquire some of those things and possibly do something with them.
Did you only say that as a save from the dean? That's not my question. So what attracted you to K-State? And what's been your biggest challenge in your first semester here?
Well, to be 100% honest, my wife lives in Kansas, and we've been separated for 2 cities for 5 years.
Wow.
And so there are pluses and minuses to that. And it's she really does. And, I actually think she missed me more when I was in Chicago than she does now. But so it was, complete luck that, we had talked about this for a long time, that it was more a position that I found myself in Chicago and the extent of my career. It was not really realistic to think that I was going to be able to move to Kansas City or Kansas, because there aren't that many art programs that are any good, and they're, but something happened. And so, of course, because I didn't want to be divorced, I applied for the job, and then I got it. But the biggest challenge, again, to be honest, is the faculty did not feel, whether this is the true thing or not, the faculty did not feel led well enough towards a positive goal. And trying to marshal the faculty to forget about the past, whatever issues they might have had in the past, and to come together because when you have the 9 concentrations, you know, the way in which that has developed over the years and years is that there are silos that get built up, and people not in a bad way, not speaking to each other, but sort of just going past each other in the way that they're operating their areas, and the way that they're teaching. And both from a, I don't know, certainly from a collegial standpoint, but also from a contemporary art standpoint, that's not the way art practice in America is today, that is out in the world. That artists are making things that are no longer, I'm a printmaker and I only make prints, or I'm a painter and I only paint. You know, painters are making prints and they're making 3-dimensional sculptures, and painters are making electronic things. And that takes a certain sort of both commitment and loosening up to be a teacher and allow other people to talk about work that does this as opposed to doing that. And it's a challenge. And it's also, but it's necessary. And the faculty is now, there were recent retirements, relatively recent retirements. So the faculty is actually younger than it's been in a while, and they understand this. But their feeling was that somehow they weren't moving in that direction, and they weren't able to move themselves in that. Sometimes faculty will, you know, do their own thing.
No.
They weren't that faculty, probably because they were younger and you know, worried about tenure. But so that's the biggest challenge. It's pulling the group together to move in a direction. And you know, these are none of the things that have become the challenges were the things that I thought would be the challenge. You know. And so that's a little bit also been a surprise.
We know there's a direct correlation between the quality of life in a place and the quality of vision with promoting arts in that place. Whether that place is a city, a state, a country. Years ago, the College of Music had an appreciation of music course for all students, not just music students, for the entire university and for the community, which was taught by Warren Walker here for years, quite popular, to get people to understand music so they can appreciate music and enjoy it. Do you have anything that correlates to that for all students at K-State and the public and the national campus?
Yes and no. So in one sense, and this is within K-State, in one sense, our basic survey art history courses are essentially courses that will introduce people to students to the history of the making of visual art and how it has intersected with cultures throughout the years. So it's more rigorous than generally art appreciation courses are. Although I will also say that, so that's on one level. On the second level, some of our concentrations, and I'm trying to get more of our concentrations to do this, have courses of, for instance, ceramics for non-majors. And we are going to try this summer to have a course, studio art for non-majors, to bring people who are not artists into our facility and do projects that will help to make them understand what it is to make things and how making things is another way of critical thinking. And I'm actually going to teach a course this summer of graphic design for non-majors, so that because the graphic design program in particular, there's no room for any other students than the graphic design students. You know, it's a popular major. So you know, there have been other areas around programs around campus that have apparently been asking for this for a long time. So I'm going to try it out this summer and see if they were telling me the truth. And so, those sorts of ways that we do have that, and, yes. Yeah, but my president's getting up, so I have to stop.